In centuries past, throughout the land of Greece, Christian fathers taught to their young boys a song whose message was one of utter dependence upon the Lord and His ability, should it be His will, to see them through great adversity. It was a tale of a man who loved not violence, but whose hand was forced to draw the sword when four cowards whose lack of courage transformed them from soldiers to deserters to criminals who robbed, raped, and murdered those weaker than them. When these criminals crossed his path and threatened not only his life, but the life of his wife and his children as well. Outnumbered, this man bowed his head to the Lord his God and prayed for the deliverance of his family before drawing a sword and becoming the very instrument that God would use to save his wife and children.
Heavenly Father,
Abba, the glorious God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all of creation lies under your authority, my sovereign of all. And your son died for me, the chief of sinners. I'm humbled in a prostrate position, Lord, even when my knees in the wind, standing straight at 6'10". I'm nothing, Lord, just grass in the breeze, passing through time's grasp with ease. So I'm not so foolish as to believe that my strength and my stature, the skills I receive by your grace, are enough to relieve my family and me of this threat. Unless you deliver us from the hands of death, we will surely die. And though it be my wish to spill no man's blood, my prayer is this: let not my enemies prevail this day over me. Glorious Lord, I pray in your mercy, please cut us not off from the land of the living, my God and my rock, my fortress. All powerful Lord, please strengthen my hands and guide my sword. And if it be your will for our souls to come in your presence, then your will be done. And as he finished his prayer with death in the air, he rose to his feet while his enemies stared. Scared he was not, but well aware if he failed, his family would not be spared. With that thought on his mind, he began to sprint, sword cocked in the air with both elbows bent in the direction of his foes, till he reached the soldier, and in one swing took his head off his shoulders with his back still bent and his sword to the ground. Two soldiers charged in his direction. Next in line to fill his blade was the one on his left. Icarus turned around and put his sword in his chest, and as he pulled it out, the other soldier with determination and hate began to lift his sword in the air, and then swung it right at Icarus and pulled the blade across his back. But before he got a chance to swing again, Icarus turned around and swung his sword at his stomach and missed him by 1 inch. As he stepped back, and as he did, he began to laugh, and with a devilish grin positioned himself to strike Icarus again. And as he swung his sword in all his foolish pride, Icarus ducked the blade and put his sword in his side.
Heavenly Father, Heavenly Father.
As Icarus looked at all the bodies on the ground, tears welled in his eyes and began to roll down the side of his face. Inside of his palm was the cause of the death of men now gone, and that thought filled him with anguish and killed him. He shook as he stared at the sword that killed him, and briefly he was tempted by the thought of taking his sword and throwing it to the side. But he thought about his wife and thought about his son. Then he gripped the sword tight and let the tears run. But before he begun to fight again, he looked at his enemy and cried, dear friend, what good is there in murder? What good is there in death? No, the wages of sin only lead to death, and these men approve. But don't hear me wrong, it is not my hope for me to cause you harm. And if you relent and you turn back now, I will gladly throw my sword to the ground. But should you choose at all in any way to pursue this further, you will die this day. The soldier ran towards Icarus' hand. Icarus stood fast with his sword in his hand. His knees were bent as he squatted, positioned in the spots of his sword not covered in blood. Now stood in the afternoon sun and glistened, sword held with conviction. No breeze or wind, a storm could move him as the soldier moved in his direction and began to close in. He thrust his sword toward Icarus, frozen. Framer soon found his frame in motion as the blade approached him only inches away. Icarus threw his sword down and blocked the blade. Then he thrust his sword inside of the shoulder of the soldier, pulled it out and watched him bend over, hoping it was over. He moved a little closer and offered his hand to help him stand, but the soldier gripped his sword with relentless determination and with a thirst for vengeance, regained his composure and began to stand on trembling knees and with shaky hands. He swung from the hip and hit Icarus' side, punched him in the mouth and said, "Now you die." Then he swung his sword, but before he struck Icarus threw his blade back up, and when he did, the swords they clashed against. He judged it with the sound to make the soldier tense, and before he could flinch, he felt Icarus' kick his knee with a blow that could break the brick. And as he felt his knee underneath his flesh being split in half, he gasped for breath, and before he could fall, Icarus to his left fist at his chin and hit him right in the cleft. And then he fell to his knees, and in a thunderous roar, screamed to the heavens in pain and impure hatred and fury, yelled, "Curse the Lord." Then he took a deep breath and fell on his sword. At that moment, Icarus felt relief wash over his body, and he fell to his knees, and with tears in his eyes he began to praise the triune God, the Ancient of Days.